Welcome back to another video about these two great cars, with both of them being available to order around the world throughout this year. BYD have been moving into Europe this year quite a bit, and here in Australia. By around August, actually, they'll both be on sale here. I figured we should talk about what you can realistically expect if you wanted to buy one. Not just going over the specs, the general specs, but what can you expect? Which is good to know if you're thinking of buying an EV for the first time. So this video is for everybody, but it is also aimed at helping people that are new to EVs. So this may be a bit longer than usual, but please stick around until the end because I promise you it's interesting. And the part about charging curves is quite important here too. Let's talk about the price and the range, efficiency, charging speeds for BYD vehicles, how they compare against other brands of vehicles. And I know people around the world will be watching, but I'm based here in Australia, so I'll talk a bit about how they will both fare on long road trips from Brisbane, from where I am now, all the way down to places like Sydney and Melbourne, to see if that sort of trip will bring with it any issues. Typically the main issue that gets mentioned when people talk about EVs on long road trips is that fossil fuel cars are quick and easy to refuel and EVs are slow. But for most people it's quite rare, or definitely not an everyday thing, to go on long out-of-state trips. So this whole EV system that we're constructing around the world now isn't really built for the few people that rack up huge kilometers every day. It's primarily for the masses of people that use their cars to get to work and travel to the shops, for example. Waiting at the charger for an hour for your car to charge isn't ideal, of course, but that fact alone isn't significant enough to abandon EVs and go back to burning fossil fuels. So with that being said, let's keep going. Let's compare the BYD Dolphin with the BYD Seal side by side. So the BYD Dolphin Premium, not the standard version, Premium, with the bigger 60 kilowatt hour battery pack, has a range of 420 kilometers roughly. Realistically, if you drive on a motorway 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, you'll get about 400 to 420 realistically. If you insist on going a little bit quicker at 110, that will go down a bit. This is because you use a lot more power to go that little bit quicker. So if you always aim for to have about 15% or more battery at the time that you arrive at the charger, this leaves you with a reasonable buffer, I think. This changes for different people. In case the charger doesn't work, for example, this is a common issue. It is a bit of a risky thing, let's face it. This is quite possible, so always try to have a plan B for your charging if you can. So in the Dolphin, you should be able to realistically do a stretch on the motorway 90 to 100 kilometers per hour. You should be able to do 365 or so kilometers between charges, with that element of safety, that buffer that we talked about. I do recommend using apps such as a Better Route Planner, where you can tell the app what your car is, and it basically calculates your stops and gives you lots of options between charges, and it takes into consideration the topography of the land and how much battery you'll have left at the charger once you arrive, because it sort of considers how much power you're likely to use. For example, on a flat motorway going 100 kilometers, you'll use X amount of power, but going over a mountain, like a windy, hilly road for 100 kilometers, you'll use more, and it takes this into consideration. So this is very, very good. We should also just remind ourselves just how far 365 kilometers actually is. It's almost half the way between Brisbane and Sydney. Or to put it in another way, it's like driving for almost 4 hours straight with no stopping. And that is a very, very long way. The BYD Seal has a bigger range of about 450 to 500 kilometers per charge, realistically. If you drive on the motorway, again, at 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, you'll no doubt be seeing somewhere around the 500 kilometer mark. But it will be more like 450 if you go 110 kilometers per hour. So with your 15% spare buffer at the bottom of the charge, you'll be able to drive about 425 kilometers between charges, which is fantastic, especially for driving between Brisbane and Sydney, for example. That means you can charge once in the middle of the trip. So again, this is like driving for about 4 hours, 50 minutes or so, non-stop at 100 kilometers per hour. And that is a very long drive. I imagine for most people, this sort of range is totally not going to be an issue if you are driving in and around your hometown. The range becomes something to think about when you're kind of doing these really big trips. But generally, with a car that has 300 or 400 kilometers in range, that's not, you probably never think of it as an issue for your, throughout almost the entire month. It's just when you do these big trips, it might become a bit of a concern, I think. The Dolphin has a power of 70 kilowatts or 94 horsepower, totally fine, or 150 kilowatts or 201 horsepower. Both feel perfectly fine. The 150 kilowatt version will feel definitely a bit fast if you're not used to that sort of power. Like, that is pretty decent. The Seal, though, is basically just a fast car. It's just not a slow car, it's just, period, fast car. It comes with 230 kilowatts or 308 horsepower, or 390 kilowatts, 522 horsepower. But electric cars, as you probably know, most of you, unless you're very new to EVs, are very torquey. So they all feel faster than they seem if you're just looking at the statistics on paper. So before we carry on, thank you very much to anybody for joining on Patreon or YouTube memberships, which is awesome, or anybody that has bought me a coffee on Buy Me a Coffee. Links to these in the description below. This allows me to keep on creating these videos, which involves investing a huge amount of time in thorough research, confirming data from various sources, reaching out to BYD, for example. My goal is to provide you with accurate information, which you might not find readily available in the mainstream media as you just click through the internet. So the easiest way to help if you're a bit skint is to just press the like button, and this shows YouTube that people like the video, which is really awesome. It makes a huge difference because I'm trying to do this as my day job. And when you press the like button or subscribe, or you're helping me spread information out there about EVs to help boost the uptake of them, in particular the cheaper end of the market, which is where we really need to get things going. It also helps my videos when people comment things below. So I encourage you to say anything you like below. It's really kind of cool to see people having conversations, like full-on conversations in the comments. It's pretty cool. And I read through and I'll comment and get back to you. So any questions, just put them in the comments and I'll get back in touch. Let's carry on. They both come with a big touchscreen at the front, which both feel modern and both feel like what sort of touchscreen experience you would hope for in a 2023 vehicle. Comparable to the Tesla touchscreens, that's the sort of quality and look and feel that we're going to get from them. That's, in reality, when you actually play with them, that's the sort of experience you'll get. So it's like really up there. Both are very quiet inside. Both will come to Australia, at least, with a 5-star ANCAP rating for safety. And in Europe, it's called the Euro NCAP. They'll get 5-star for that, which is as safe as you can get. They actually had to extend the BYD Dolphin at the front and back, mostly at the front though, by 22 centimeters in total, and add a little bit of extra strength to the front to pass the 5-star rating. Price, this is a bit tricky to discuss the price. Also, it kind of makes the cheap car branding of the Dolphin just sort of fade away a little bit as it goes up. But the price, the Dolphin will be around $42,000 if you want the small motor with the big battery pack. Sadly, so it's not, if you get, but it's not to say that the small battery pack isn't enough, because it's really only a little bit smaller. But in Australia, if you can, you should probably aim for the bigger one. If it's not too much, but we're probably talking about $5,500 extra for the 60 kilowatt hour battery pack rather than the 49. So that's a big deal. So basically, before on-road costs and before any rebates have been taken off, about $42,000 with the small motor and the big battery pack. So if you want the big motor and the big battery, it will be more than that, but we're unsure how much more, so we just don't know. The BYD Seal, we again can't be too sure, but we know it's going to be floating around the Tesla Model 3 price, as everyone's kind of speculating. That is $61,000 or so, give or take, potentially just under, but it could also be a little bit higher. We don't really know. There's a lot of speculation on that because of some of the wording that Luke Todd, he's the boss of the company called EV Direct, he said something, and people are sort of interpreting that in different ways. He sort of said that the BYD Seal is competing with the wider market, not just the Model 3. So that kind of sounds like the sort of thing you might say if you're justifying a higher price. I think that is what people are getting at. So we don't know. So definitely a fair chunk of money more than the Dolphin. Before we finish here, let's mention the charging speeds. BYD vehicles have what they call a flat charging curve, which means that most of the charge you'll see full or very close to full charging speeds, and then it only slows down a bit toward the end. A lot of EVs, as we know, have terrible charging speeds, and the peak charging speed can sometimes feel kind of elusive because you barely ever see it. And are you one of those people at night that lay in bed looking at charging curves? Come on, I am. The Dolphin has a max speed of apparently 80 kilowatt charging, but in reality it gets 88, just like the Atto 3, until about 60% or so, and then it drops to 60 kilowatt. The Seal, the BYD Seal, we don't really know exactly, but we know on paper instead of 80, it's going to be 150 kilowatts maximum. So I guess we'll maybe see 100 to 150 for most of the charge. BYD vehicles are always fairly impressive at charging. So generally, unless you're really pushing it and you're going like, say, Brisbane to Sydney, if you're just going on a fairly long journey and you don't need to stress about really charging up to full, generally 30-40 minutes at a charger and you're back on the road again, assuming it's a half decent charger, not a 50 kilowatt charger, which is still classed as rapid, but it's not exactly. So if you enjoyed the video, please click the like button so that YouTube know people are enjoying it, and subscribe for more daily videos about electric vehicles.